Well, hello there everyone, Simon here once again with another episode of Aimless Articles, where we go onto Wikipedia, search through random articles and try and find the bizarre, the wonderful, the interesting or the funny, just to make a video on. The last two episodes have been really interesting and we've had a fairly common theme. In the first episode, we did a video on some of the rock music and rock bands that were established during the time of the Galactic Civil War, and then last week's episode, we encountered a dance, a waltz, that was in one of the Darth Vader annual comics, and we essentially saw what happens when you invite Darth Vader to a dance. He doesn't normally take it too well, especially if you're not playing ball with the Emperor, and it was a really interesting video to make. I'll tell you what, I've been having a lot of fun making these videos. They can be a little stressful because you never know what you're going to pull up. They can be a little bit difficult to edit at times, but I've been having a lot of fun just being quite creative, learning a lot of things, and just being able to get kind of, you know, a different vibe on Star Wars in a time where we are in a bit of a lull for content. Although we did have the Skeleton Crew trailer come out over the weekend, so please do go check that out. And as I say, this video is up a little bit later just because of everything that's been going on with the D23 Expo. As I say, I'm going to try and aim for one episode every week. It might not always be possible, but we'll do our best to get there. So without further ado, why don't we jump onto Wikipedia and run through the rules and find out what we're going to make a video on this week. And so here we are back on the homepage of Wikipedia, and as you can see up here in the top right, we are now sitting at 193,926 pages, so there's been 120 pages added since last week. Again, probably a lot of it to do with the D23 Expo over the weekend, the Skeleton Crew trailer, maybe giving people a few more tidbits just to, you know, add into this encyclopedia. But it just shows you the huge amounts of information, even during a lull in content, there is to be added in every week. So, as always, the rules are I'm going to hit the random page button 5 times as a maximum. We're going to use one of those 5 articles to make a video on, something that we find funny, informative, random, or wacky. And, you know, again, I don't have to use all 5 picks. If I can't find anything really useful within those 5 picks, I can delve into one of them and use a linked article and make a video on that. And, again, I get to choose whether it's a Legends or a canon aspect. So, yeah, why don't we check out and see what we're going to be making a video on this week. So here we go, random page number 1. Hakak Bush. Okay. That's an interesting name. They grow on Tatooine and Hakak beams. I don't know if anyone's a red dwarf fan, but I feel like the Gelf. This is something from the Gelf language. If you've not seen Red Dwarf, that's probably meaningless to you, but that's how they speak. These big bear-like monsters. Either way, I don't think we're going to be able to do anything on that. So let's have a look at number 2, First Republic Medical Academy of Coruscant. Okay, so this is a Legends article. It is essentially a university course for a medical school. It's in the Old Republic Holonet, so it's from an encyclopedia. Yeah, not really much we can go off of there, so let's have a look at the next one. X-Wing Collector's Series. Now, you know what? This is some of my favourite memories as a child playing Star Wars games is X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. I absolutely adored this game. It was so difficult. Like, you know, early versions of joysticks were really janky. Obviously, the gameplay is not very advanced, but I absolutely adored the game because it was one of the first games that allowed you to play as the Empire. And honestly, that to me was more exciting than, you know, anything else because it was a perspective we never got before. And I was always fascinated with the Empire as a child, just like the ships, the uniforms. You know, this sounds a little bit creepy, but I mean this in like a genuinely I'm not a Nazi kind of way. You know, it was just like genuinely interesting to me. And, you know, X-Wing versus TIE Fighter was one of the first games that I ever actually played. I will admit, I've never actually played TIE Fighter or X-Wing. The gameplay is exactly the same, it's just each game focused on, you know, the individual elements of the Rebel Alliance or the Empire. So I may well start up a series on that. You know, that gives me an idea, but this is definitely leading the way for my video here because I would love to make a video on this game series because it means a lot to me. It really genuinely does. So that's a really good one to pick out. So let's go with number 3. BB9E. Okay, so yeah, this little, you know, BB-8, I think, was the name that was coined for him during production. But the little black droid that popped up during The Last Jedi and snuffed out the infiltrators in a story arc that I found rather pointless. Again, my view of The Last Jedi has softened quite a bit over the years, but that story arc with Finn and Rose still bugs me because of the lost potential on Finn, and just how it just didn't feel like it really meant that much in the grand scheme of things. Don't get me wrong, it was great to see them sneaking on board a Star Destroyer, but they didn't really get to do much other than that. So we'll keep this in the back pocket. I mean, it's a shame because I think I would have liked to have made a video on this little guy in a separate thing. This is going to be the case. I reckon some weeks I'll get nothing, and some weeks I'll get like 2 or 3 really good articles back to back. So we'll go for the 4th page. Bulwark Mark 1. Oh, is this the ship from Jedi not Jedi Outcast? Is it Jedi Outcast? Where are we from? No, it's not. Why am I getting the name Bulwark from that? Either way, it's a ship. It's a Bulwark class battleship. Oh, it's a kilometer long. Maybe I've seen it in. That's what it is. It's in Empire at War. It's in Empire at War because it's for the Techno Union. I remember now. Yes, I do remember now. And random page number 5. Blade Fight, a subsection of the 77th Air Wing's Sword Squadron. So this is the Galactic Empire. They had a squadron called Sword Squadron. I don't know if they brought that into canon. I don't know if they did. Let's just have a look at Sword Squadron. No, they didn't. Okay, I think I'm going to make it on that X-Wing series, which is going to be a really, really interesting video. It might take me a little bit longer to do just because of how much detail there might be. But I'm looking forward to making this video. So yeah, stick around. Future Simon, it's off to you. The X-Wing series is a trilogy of flight simulator games released by LucasArts back in the early to mid 1990s on the PC. The first game released way back in 1993 on floppy disk, and it was Star Wars X-Wing, and it was actually the very first game released by LucasArts that was set in the Star Wars universe. Its development was sparked following the successful Thrawn trilogy novels by Timothy Zahn, and the success of previous LucasArts games in the flight simulator genre, such as Secret Weapons of the Luftwaffe by Lawrence Holland, also contributed towards the decision on what type of game to make. Now, the plot revolved around players taking on the role of a rebellion pilot named Kayan Farlander, who would pilot X-Wings, Y-Wings, A-Wings, and later on B-Wings in combat just before the Battle of Yavin took place. The game opens up with some wonderfully nostalgic MS-DOS era cutscenes of a battle between the Rebels and the Empire, with Admiral Akbar making an appearance. Now, these cutscenes continue through the game, with Darth Vader trying to hunt down the rebellion, loosely following the plot of A New Hope. Now, the later Imperial Pursuit expansion pack also features this wonderfully cheesy cutscene of a fat overlord being visited by Vader after he betrayed the Empire.
Lord Vader! What a great privilege to have you unexpectedly grace my humble domain. How may I serve you?
We received your grain shipment, Scord, and the Emperor has sent me here to personally repay you for your treachery.
Hey, yeah, droids? I don't think he's going to be needing his fanning anymore. Hello? No? Well, I guess they're going to be there a while. They really must be the Overlord's biggest fans. Get it? Fans? Now, in terms of gameplay, it was quite advanced for the time, using a custom graphics engine that was one of the first to use 3D polygons, very similar to the Wing Commander games. Players would go on missions with different objectives, from destroying enemy fighters to escort missions. Now, it was notoriously difficult and remains a challenge to this day, for me at least, but it had some really interesting features, like the power system, and it allowed you to customize how the power was distributed through shields, engines, and weapons. The game was also the first non-adventure game to feature iMuse, which is the interactive music streaming engine, and it would prompt musical cues depending on in-game actions, like friendly or hostile ships arriving. It sounds fairly basic now, but back in 1993 that was almost unheard of, and when added in with the MIDI soundtrack that featured a host of original trilogy themes, it really did feel like you were taking part in the battles that you'd seen on screen, albeit for me it involved getting blown up a lot. The game released and was a commercial success, selling over 500,000 copies by the end of 1993, and reviews were generally favourable, and it also won several awards from magazines and reviewers. The game then had 2 expansions which were added shortly after its release, and it was upgraded in 1994 with a CD-ROM version that again improved the graphics and cutscenes. Then in 1994, its sequel TIE Fighter was released, and it gave you the chance to fight for the Galactic Empire, something that no other game had allowed you to do at that point. It used the same general gameplay, but featured improved rendering and more flight options. It also flushed out the briefings, giving players a chance to interact with their surroundings and some of the NPCs. Interestingly, the plot here gave us our first ever look at Coruscant, or as it was pronounced in the game, Coruscant.
Sir, the TIE Defenders are on board, but Zarin's research facility has been destroyed.
Prepare to leave for Coruscant. The Emperor has ordered that these TIE Defenders be transported there immediately.
Players once again take the role of a pilot, this time the Imperial Navy named Marek Stell, who has to go on several missions to attack not just rebels but also pirates. Naturally, the game tries to position the Empire as a sympathetic entity fighting for peace and order, but there is still an insidious nature of the fascist regime with threats from Vader and other superiors should the player fail. Now we get to see Thrawn and Pelion commanding Imperial forces and trying to get the TIE Defender into production. Interestingly, there's a similar plot here as in Rebels, where Thrawn has to compete against another admiral who's developing a cloaking device, and this mirrors the fight that he has with Director Krennic over the Death Star program in canon. Emperor Palpatine shows up several times, addressing the Senate, rewarding the player with a medal, and eventually promoting Thrawn to Grand Admiral.
Admiral Thrawn, I am promoting you to Grand Admiral for your obedient service to the Empire.
Meanwhile, Vader does his usual thing of force-choking poor sods who've just happened to have annoyed him. Now to this day, it remains the only Star Wars game to progress entirely from the perspective of the villains, something that I dare say we would love to have to this day. No more 20 minutes of being on the side of the Empire before we change over. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Battlefront 2. And along with improvements to rendering, the engine was upgraded to allow more fighters in combat and in higher detail. It also enhanced the AI, making the game far more challenging. Now the HUD was exceptional for the time, and it remains one of my favourites in the way that it's laid out. It gives you a visual of the target that you're focused on, along with its position adjacent to your own craft. Now similar to X-Wing, it was initially released on floppy disk before getting its CD upgrade in 1995, which again improved on the graphics and offered a higher resolution. The game's initial release was even better than X-Wing, with GameSpot in particular calling it the greatest space combat game ever made. And following on shortly from its release, it got 2 small expansion packs that added a few missions to the main game. And finally, in 1997, there was X-Wing vs TIE Fighter, which initially didn't have a story campaign, and it was just a compilation of different missions that you could play across both the Empire and the Rebellion. A story campaign was added in a later expansion, which pitted the player as a member of Rogue Squadron, going on several different missions against the Empire. Now, the base game offered massive upgrades on the original 2 and introduced multiplayer for the first time. It gave players the option of choosing which squad they wanted to be part of on missions. For example, in a bombing mission, they could be either the escort or the bomber. And when you think about it, this was essentially the 1997 version of Battlefront from 2015, purely for the purpose of multiplayer and skirmish experiences. Though, if you didn't have any friends who played the game, or you didn't have a decent network, it might be seen as a bit redundant to play over the other 2. So there we have it. That is the X-Wing and TIE Fighter collection series. You can get the trilogy on Steam and GOG. It's been a trilogy that I've only played, as I mentioned, the X-Wing versus TIE Fighter elements, and I really now want to go and play the X-Wing and TIE Fighter versions of the game just to get that experience. Again, the gameplay is probably going to be a little archaic, but it's still going to be a lot of fun. It's very, very challenging, but these were some of the first experiences that I had with Star Wars games back in the 1990s when I was just a kid. These and Shadows of the Empire were my introductions into the expansive world of Star Wars Legends. It prompted me to pick up a few more of the books, and again, it really kind of started that journey for me into becoming a proper Star Wars nerd. So I'd love very much for you to tell me if you've played any of the games, what's your opinion on them. But this is done for the next episode of Aimless Articles. Again, something a little bit different, very informative this time, but very much personal to me. So I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please do hit the subscribe button, leave a like on the video, and I will see you for the next episode.